and this will be happening soon this year. And Egypt is really trying to make out of this conference a real turning point in the international climate efforts in coordination with all parties involved, and also for the benefit of Africa and the entire world. So we thought Ali had a very interesting idea, or Dr. Ali, the director of Gerhard Center, had a very interesting idea to make use of the experience of establishing a university network in the UK in the COP26, or to serve in the COP26. And he had the idea of inviting a very important key player in establishing this network, which is our guest speaker today, Alyssa Gilbert. And she was the person behind this network. She was the person who was able, of course, with the team, to bring more than 80 UK universities, an unbelievable big network that was established to prepare and develop activities before the COP, during the COP, and definitely planning for many activities to be implemented in the future, as she is going to tell us. But just to give you a very brief idea about Alyssa Gilbert, she is the Director of Policy and Translation at the Guggenheim Institute, Climate Change and Environmental at the very well-known Imperial College of London. She is a key player, again, in connecting different actors and policymakers, university professors, networks. So it seems that she is a wonderful player in connecting entities and connecting people together. As you can see, she established this huge network of universities before the COP26, and also playing such a very important role inside her university, connecting different different stakeholders and different policymakers together. Before joining the university, she worked as a specialist in the energy and climate actions or climate issues. And she's also very well aware of the technical dimensions of energy and climate change. And this was not a very short time, it was at least 12 years of experience in consultancy related activities. And she also worked with the UK and many other national governments at the international level. So she has a very, very long CV. I don't think I'm gonna go further. I just want to today not to speak about her, but at least to learn and listen to her. So I will stop here and give Alyssa the floor. So Alyssa, we will be enjoying your speech. Thank you for accepting the invitation, and thank you for being with us. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for your kind words. I'm just going to share my presentation so that you can all see as I tell you this story. So thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to hear me tell you the story of how myself and some colleagues built a network of universities to try and support the UK's presidency of the climate change negotiations, COP26, that just happened in November last year. There are some slides, but I want you to kind of treat this a little bit as a story, really. And I'm really excited to have the opportunity to share this with all of you in Egypt, because one of the things we really thought, myself and the other people involved in the network, after quite an exhausting year, well, it was more than a year, but after the COP, we thought we really would love it if we could somehow share our experience with colleagues in Egypt, not to tell you to do this, but to really hopefully inspire you to see what we did that would work also for you in your context. So I'm really delighted to be able to tell you the story and then take your questions and discuss with you what might be different in your situation, but also what might be the same or similar, and even where we might be able to do some things together, actually, as you look forward to COP27. So first of all, I just want to start with what is COP, because this is actually quite important. We built this network of universities in a way to support COP, but actually many of the people in the different universities that we spoke to, both senior people, but also even academics who worked on some aspect of climate change, weren't really up to speed with what the international climate negotiations really were that took place every year in a different place. It became very high on people's radar because as soon as your government decides to support something like this, a big presidency, at least our government started to make a lot of noise about it. And we knew it was to do with climate change, but many people who did the physics of climate change, for example, or the impacts of climate change, and did very serious and deep research in it, may not have been involved in the international negotiations part of the story. Now, the thing is that COP is really vitally important in bringing together at this international level all of the all of the countries around the world, over 195 countries. And it's important in maintaining momentum, and it's important in taking forward a lot of the different elements of action on climate change globally. And it does matter to show this continued global agreement that climate change deserves action. And it's also a very important moment often every year to reiterate what the science and the evidence is, and also to make sure that the decisions that these international governments are taking are based on that science and evidence. Now, because of that, there is obviously an opportunity for universities are doing the latest leading edge research, often on many of the dimensions connected to this international negotiations. And what you do want to see is that your country makes an agreement that is possible, but also ambitious, reflects the science of the challenge and the urgency of issues like climate change and related environmental issues, but also is grounded in an understanding of what is possible and what other interrelated factors exist. Many of those are social sciences can really contribute to this. And in addition to that, universities have a huge reach. Actually, universities offer not just research, but also education and are a location where many students and young people coalesce. And so there's a real opportunity also educationally when this event takes place. And universities also have the potential to offer thought leadership, vision, and so on, that goes perhaps beyond the actual day-to-day job of academics and people working in universities. So there was really a lot of potential around a COP event, both to help support the direction of the international negotiations themselves, but also to make the most of this activity taking place in your own country. And that was something that was also quite exciting. When COP26 took place in the UK, it was the 26th such international negotiation. There's actually quite a large community of people who work in physics or engineering, but also in social sciences, on the legal side in the UK, working in areas that are related to the issues of climate change. But never before had the UK ever taken the leadership to actually be the president leading the international negotiations and the debate. So that was a further opportunity for universities. And that will be the same for you in Egypt now, because when your country is taking the responsibility of leading the international community, then suddenly the government has to behave in a certain way. It may also release more resources, and also may recognize the skills that exist in the country and use them more than they would have in the past. So it's an opportunity to shine, but also to push the bar in your own country. So how did it all begin, this universities network? Now, I'm not expecting you to be able to sort of read through this Word document, but I wanted to share it because this is literally how it all began. This was before the pandemic was really evident at all. So in September 2019, I wrote this Word document. And this, I just found it now on my computer while I was preparing this talk. And what happened was we knew, we'd heard rumors across the kind of environmental community in the UK that the UK was probably going to take on the presidency of COP, and COP26 was going to be in November 2020. So it wasn't going to be last year. This was before things got delayed from COVID. So just about a year before that, when we heard rumors, a few of us at different universities who have the privilege of working in special climate change units within the university, so that I work at the Grantham Institute. We spoke to a couple of specialist institutes at other universities. So we have colleagues at Leeds University, at the London School of Economics, at Cambridge University. And we got together and we said, okay, if the UK is going to be president of all of, of these international negotiations, it seems really important to us who represent academic expertise and knowledge that we're somehow, plugged into that, because we really, really wanted to make sure that the UK did a good job of being the president. And I'm sure you feel the same way. It's a moment of pride that your government is taking on leadership of such an important issue, especially when you're involved in it in detail. But it's also a little bit of a moment for anxiety, because you do want to make sure that your government does a good job of that. And of course, you know that you have this great links to all of these academics, and you don't really know for sure if that's going to be taken advantage of by your government. So we wrote this little concept note, and a few of us got together from, just the people that we already knew who worked in different universities and said, well, what would we like to do? What do you think we have to offer as a scientific and an academic and a research community? How could we use that to help deliver a successful COP? So, if your eyesight, for those of you who have this on your screen right up close, you can see we came up with some ideas how we could share evidence, that we could put on some talks, we could host meetings, we could use our international reach, do some media engagement and so on. So with this, we sort of started to deliver a kind of a concept of what we could do. And here are our overall kind of aspirations when we boiled it all down. What we thought we wanted to do was make sure there was a single point of contact for whoever's leading the UK presidency with the universities, because what we realized was every single university in the country had some people who could contribute and help, also had some way that they could help with things like media engagement and so on. But there's no way that the people in government who were leading the COP presidency would be able to have individual conversations with all of the different universities to make the most of it. So we felt like it was our responsibility to convene a single point of contact to connect with the people in government. So that was our first aspiration. The second thing was, as I said, really, we wanted to ensure success of COP. We felt like it's partly our responsibility to push as far as we can the level of ambition, but also the level of evidence that's behind and making sure that we can drive it in an accurate direction to the extent that we can, recognizing that we're, of course, not politicians, but we do have something important to give to the debate. We also really wanted to make sure that the most was made of the academic expertise that existed in the UK. We didn't want to get the feeling that something was happening and there were experts being ignored somewhere, or just the government didn't even know where to find them. And finally, we thought this was a great opportunity to drive action on climate change. So we really saw this, that there was going to be the chance for the UK to actually do more on climate change at home with its international aid money and through various other routes. And this was an opportunity, slightly apart from the international negotiations, for us to actually provide evidence and direction for some action on climate change at home. Now, here I've given a little bit of a spoiler here on the right on who we are, who we became, really, because this was our initial aspiration. And by now, actually, I've just taken this off our website, but actually, we are now a group of 90 UK universities and research centres, which is a very large proportion of all of the universities in the UK. And as you can see here, our mission was to ensure that the UK academic sector plays its role in delivering a successful COP26. I'll finish, when I get to the end, I'll tell you a little bit about what we're going to do in the future, but this was our main focus. So what was our initial approach? Well, we thought, let's make it as easy as possible for academics and researchers and professional staff to join us wherever they are in the UK and whatever university. So we just said, it's free to join, no fees. We want you to join no matter what your discipline is. So it was very important to us that those people, I gave some examples before, but the people who are doing, for example, designing satellites to assess the atmosphere, people talking about climate systems in the very basic physics, through to people who are developing renewable power, renewable technology, and then through to the people doing the social sciences, legal structures of climate change acts, the legal dimensions, in fact, of the agreements itself and the international agreements itself, people who are working on assessments of vulnerability and the interaction between climate change and a range of social issues. All of those people, we wanted to be able to feel like they could be involved. We made it open to all of the universities in the UK, and in the UK, most research is funded by what we call UKRI, the UK Research and Innovation Organisation. So anyone who is funded by UKRI, we're able to join, and that is why there's a slightly odd thing in the UK that we have some academic researchers who sit outside universities. So we have 7 research organisations that have specialist areas that are outside university. So all of those people are welcome. We also deliberately made it welcome to professional staff, not just academic staff. So people like me, so I work at a university, but my expertise, although I have a lot of broad technical expertise on issues related to climate change and policy. I'm not a research academic myself. We know that there are lots of people at universities who specialize, for example, in the UK in public engagement, in science communication. And we wanted to make sure that those people became part of our network. And in the end, that was a really good decision, and something that actually many of the members of the network particularly praised us for, because that's actually what enabled us to do a lot of our activity, because we ended up having people who had a whole lot of different skills, as well as just academic knowledge, and we could combine those to have the impact that we wanted to have. So this was how we set ourselves up. And what we saw was rapid growth. Lots of people started to hear about our network, and they contacted us. They said, how can we join? And then we started to kind of have a regular way of getting together. So we started to meet once a month where all members could join. I mean, there are hundreds of people who are members of this network. We created an email group. We created a SharePoint site, a website, ways for people to communicate. And then we started to have some regular meetings of all of those members, in which we shared information with them about the way in which the negotiations were going, what we thought COP would be like, how we thought they could get involved. But then we could also get from that group of people volunteers to start leading the activities that we wanted to do as a network. So it was very, very organic at this point. We had some broad goals, which I've put out here. They seem a little bit vague now, but this is what we were aiming for. We wanted to make sure that, as I said, the UK academic sector and universities played their role in delivering successful COP. We wanted to make sure that the people in the government had access, easy access to evidence and academic expertise for the work that they were doing. And then we also wanted to make sure that we could get all different players on track to delivering the low carbon resilient world that we need if we're tackling climate change. So how do we do that? Well, if you go to the website now, you'll see sort of evidence of what the network has become, and lots of different examples of what it is that we do. We actually asked Glasgow University to host the website for us, and that's because Glasgow was going to be the host city of COP, and we thought that would be really nice, and it would be a sort of an appropriate mirror that Glasgow University hosted our network. And, you know, if you go to that website now, you'll find lots of different things that we're doing. We ended up having a podcast with different evidence that you can see. We created a youth film. And then some of the things that we had seen as very important was making sure that the expertise in the country was available and accessible. So we created a directory here of climate change expertise. You can search by different kinds of topics and various search functions. And we know from some of our contacts in the government that they found this function very useful. We also actually quite regularly took requests from different people in central government when they were working on a particular issue, and they said, oh, it would be really good if we had an expert on this topic. And sometimes they were even more specific. They said, we need an expert on this topic who works specifically on this topic with reference to India, or we need someone who works on this topic and is based in the north of England or something. And so we were able to try and find those people through our network. We created a number of briefing notes, which I'll talk about afterwards, and we started to create quite an active communications sort of setup. Now, all of this was voluntary. So this is really important to point out. I'm lucky enough to work at an institute on climate change that's within a university. And my job is paid for actually by a foundation, philanthropic donation. And as I said before, when we started doing this, we actually, the initial core of universities were all universities that had some kind of special climate change unit of sort. And what that meant was all of those universities actually had a little bit of resource, people resource, human resource, either in the shape of somebody like me, professional staff. Sometimes it was that they had maybe a secretarial support or back office support, and sometimes they had access to a researcher who could spend a bit of time on this. So we started to gather bits and pieces of human resource in different places. And because those universities recognized that this international climate change conference was a rare event that was going to get a lot of publicity and was very important to central government, it became very important to some of those universities. And that's what allowed people to release a little bit of resource. And we pulled that together, and we created some voluntary committees around some work streams. And it was basically supported by some time given by a variety of different universities. We recognized that, of course, some universities have more resources than others. And so this way, it helped that the universities who were better off in terms of their resources for this could also support the other ones. And that enabled academics from around all kinds of universities, big and small, to participate in the activity, even if they didn't actually have access to some special resources to do so. So we had some different work streams, and I'll just run you through some of the things that we achieved. So one of our areas of work was to make sure that we had a bit of engagement with policymakers. And we wanted to make sure that we had, this is the real heart of the sharing the evidence part of what we wanted to do. So we spent some time deciding what strategic issues we thought were important. And we could do that partly by understanding what the priorities are of government, and partly using our own understanding and expertise as a network of experts in this area. So in the end, we wrote 12 briefing papers for the policy and government audience, and they were deliberately something that we knew would resonate or connect with the government's priorities. But at the same time, sometimes we were pushing them either to think about things more broadly because we didn't like the position they were taking, or to share evidence that maybe they wouldn't have seen unless we had presented it in this kind of way. Importantly, we also held some roundtables with government and other stakeholders, because when you're creating this evidence and you want to share it to make sure that it has impact, it's actually more powerful to discuss it with different players. And we had a good, strong contact with the Cabinet Office team, and they were the content organization within government that were delivering the COP presidency. We had a regular conversation with them about once a month, and that achieved our first goal, which was, as I said, remember, a single point of contact. So we became a single point of contact for them, and they gave us a single point of contact. So we could regularly ask them, what are the priorities of government? How are the negotiations going? What kind of support would it be helpful for us to give? What are the technical issues that you're dealing with where academic expertise can be useful? And they helped us convene roundtables of 30 or 40 people within the civil service where we could share this knowledge and information and have these briefings and connect experts to have an impact, which was exciting. We also had an education and skills subgroup, which were working with the Department for Education and various other government departments to work on the UK government's Green Jobs Task Force. That's a continued area that we're going to provide a lot of input on in the future. This is the question of what jobs and skills are required to deliver a net zero UK and a resilient UK. How can we make sure that we're delivering them through the higher education sector and other parts of the education community? But how are we also making sure that our assessment of what those skills are is accurate? And that's what some people in the HE sector through their research can also give. So we did quite a lot on education, quite a lot on policy engagement. We also got some money for research fellowships on COP26. And in fact, your next speaker was awarded one of our COP26 fellowships. So we managed to get the UK's research funding organisation to support 4 very special kinds of fellowships for academics that had to be on issues that related to COP26. There had to be a dimension of their research. It was a short research program. They had a year to do their research, which included some research, some secondary research also, but also some engagement events that linked their research to COP26. And then after that, they may have had a bit of time to kind of create some follow-on activity. We also did we found some funding that we used for some activity around research and engagement on climate risk. We developed a special communications and media set of activities that was delivered by a set of communication specialists across the network. And we also did some careful international engagement, supporting some of the Foreign Office outposts of our government, and connecting with international networks of climate. There's some other international climate university networks, quite a small number, and we linked to them. But we also connected to, for example, some areas of expertise in particular regions of the world to make the spread of our impact further internationally. We also had a work stream, and still have a work stream, on what universities can do themselves. So a lot of people were interested in understanding how universities can get their own house in order. How can we make sure that our campuses are low carbon? How can we demonstrate how to do these things that we want everyone and every local government to do? How can we show that we can do it ourselves? We actually prepared a very large event in May last year, which we called Climate Expo, We partnered with some universities in Italy because Italy was a co-president of COP26, and we delivered a virtual Climate Expo conference. We did this through, again, a voluntary conference organizing committee from members across our network. This worked quite well because for academics, being involved in conference organization is something that fits well with the way that they work and with ways that they can be rewarded for the way that they spend their time. And the purpose of this conference was part of this evidence sharing approach that we had. And we did it closely with our government kind of contacts and counterparts, so that we had some sessions that were really focused on the agenda that we saw was coming in COP 6 months later. That meant we had some ministers who came to talk, and we had some sessions that were really at the policy evidence interface and really directly linked to what was coming up at COP. But we also had lots and lots of other more technical presentations as well. In the end, we had over 700 presentations, contributors from over 40 countries, and over 5,300 attendees from more than 150 countries. And this was deliberately part of an arc of conversation where we felt like the evidence had to be made accessible and packaged in the right way, but presented enough time before the main negotiation so that it could genuinely be useful. So this, I keep describing this as our arc of conversation, from evidence being provided in May, the latest cutting edge stuff with the right people in a policy relevant way that could help influence what was happening in November. We also had a work stream on public engagement, and we ended up running a public engagement stand where we had representatives over 2 weeks. We delivered, I think, about 40 different universities in our network delivered some really good public engagement. It was either games or some presentations of their research, engaging citizens of all ages at the Glasgow Science Centre in issues related to climate change, which really complemented some of the other activities that were done in the green zone or the public zone of the climate change negotiations. We also did some work on innovation. We had an innovation showcase as well, highlighting some of the work and the opportunity that there is for innovation and what happens in universities now. So we're trying to really profile in a way what innovation is, but also inspire new innovators. And finally, we engaged with some youth and we created a film called Act Now, which was also presented in the public green zone at COP26. So, you know, where I started, sorry, I'll just go back a second, where I started before, I said, you know, we had this very, very amorphous idea that we might have a network, and it gradually evolved. And this is where we ended up in terms of, we ended up with a steering group like this, myself and Emily Shukbra as the co-chairs. And we ended up with all of these different subgroups. This was our steering committee. And we ended up with a subgroup on policy and engagement, public engagement, education and skills, international activity, cities and regions, net zero universities, these briefing notes, innovation, comms. And so what you can see is that, and fellowships. So you can see is that we started to get all of this activity. All of this has been done pretty much voluntarily. Many of the people, I mean, everyone here is paid to work at a university, but their engagement with our network was voluntary. But we ended up with a very, very vibrant and large network. So I just wanted to reflect for you on some of the lessons learned and some of the things I think really I've reflected upon about what's made this a success and what we want to think about again in the future, and what might be useful to you if you're thinking about a similar Egyptian network. So as I've mentioned a few times, very dependent on voluntary time and actually having some kind of central resource or secretariat to keep these activities moving. And I was lucky enough to be able to use a couple of my normal team members who all got involved in this and helped run some of those subgroups and helped us organize meetings and stay in touch with the people we need to stay in touch with. But also I'm very grateful for the time that colleagues put in who were at Cambridge University, Leeds University, Edinburgh University, Strathclyde, all of those universities. Without them, we wouldn't have had those activities at all. So this was an important part of making it happen. But what I would say is everyone was really motivated because it was such a clear opportunity, and everyone had maybe different reasons for getting involved, but everyone was very satisfied by the opportunity to be so well connected and be such a part of what was quite an exciting exciting event. We had some additional activities too, fellowships. So we actually really managed to leverage existing and additional activity and funding. Which was kind of quite important to what we did. So the fellowships I mentioned were paid additionally by the UK Research and Innovation Organisation. And that was really valuable for us because they were willing to put some money into fellowships, and then they were happy for us to administer it because we could get lots of applications from all different universities around the country. And so by creating that leverage, we could get a little bit more resource in and we could have even more impact. So looking for those opportunities is something I'd really recommend. As I mentioned before, vital to our success was this connection we had with the government unit, this trusted relationship, being able to go back and forth and help each other out, and recognize that we had different roles in the delivery of COP. We didn't always have to agree with each other. We could do things a little bit differently, but this connection was really vital, and it was really valued by our members. That's one of the reasons why everyone wanted to be able to come to our monthly meetings, because they could find out what was really happening. Some of it, what was happening behind the scenes with the organization, but also how were the negotiations going? What were the chances of success? Where was knowledge or information going to be really extra helpful? One of the things I'd also point out is that over time, something's changed. I mentioned, of course, that we were originally aiming for COP to be in 2020, and of course, it was delayed by a year. And in the meantime, some of the things that we thought were kind of the most important started to move. And I think the best example of this is originally we had thought that actually doing some things around climate finance related to economic recovery in relation to the global pandemic was something we thought was quite important, but actually that topic was quite short-lived and actually overshadowed by the greater issue of how to gather the right amount of total climate finance and distribute that fairly, which is the kind of longer term discussion around climate finance in the context of international climate negotiations. So we needed a bit of flexibility there and need to keep on our toes. As I said, it was really important that we involved, and we found different ways. They changed over time, but to engage professional staff, academic staff, and to some extent students. You'll notice that there wasn't a kind of a student strand of what we did, even though from early on we thought that the existence of students at universities was really something unique about universities. And the reason for that is that we started to realize that actually we wanted anything that students did to really be student-led. It was a lot of work already to keep this wheel turning and the activity and the action that we had going just with the academics and professional staff. So what we did was we tried to connect students to each other when they came to us. We created a platform and we tried to be enabling. When we did the big Climate Expo conference, we had several student-led sessions, and that was also very well attended by students. And we tried to make our activities as open as possible for those students to attend and participate. One of the things that we found as an unexpected result of what we did was actually we ended up doing capacity building in the sector. We really built skills amongst people in the academic sector to do all different kinds of things that we really believe will have a lasting impact. For example, many people in the network would never have attended a sort of a round table policy with different people in government, but we were able to involve them and help people understand how to do this policy engagement well, because we were connecting different people from different universities with different expertise, but also with professional staff who knew how to do this well. And we were giving them a really great fast track access point to open the door so that they could speak to the right people. So it was really satisfying. We also did actually training on public engagement and science communication for 60 members of the network, one from a number of different universities. And what we found really was that people were really, really passionate and really, really keen to get involved. I've had such positive responses from people about their engagement. And because of that, we have every intention of keeping the network on and to continue the network as some form of UK climate universities network in the future, building on many of the different things we've done. We found actually that the main sort of visions and values that we thought were most valuable to our organization were this really extreme collaboration. We were sharing knowledge and best practice between each other, but with government, and really sharing everything we were doing. We knew that some of our unique aspects were being informative, so making sure that we became this trusted voice and we were shaping policy, that we were really expert, that we had the evidence and we were able to bring the best people in. But also what we really enjoyed was that we were grassroots. Anybody could join who was doing this job in the universities. This might be quite different in Egypt, but we had other organizations that were led by VCs of universities and very top down. And they also had a very important role to play in promoting the voice of universities at COP, but actually they didn't do most of the things that we did actually, were quite powerful because they came with this enormous manpower of hundreds and hundreds of people working across the different HE sector. We've got a lot of new objectives for this coming year. I'm conscious of time and I want the chance for conversation, but there are many different things that we hope to still do. And we've chosen these 4 main priorities for the coming year of our network: still sharing evidence for international climate action, still supporting UK action on achieving net zero emissions and adapting to climate change, still making sure our own institutions are doing the right thing, and also this focus on building capacity for external engagement within the climate research community. We found that it was really satisfying for people across the network to collaborate with each other, even though sometimes people have to compete for things like research funding. It's still only the beginning. This kind of activity matters because I'm someone who's a translator of science. I like to show this kind of cartoon where actually it's so often that, you know, the expert talks in the language that the person who asked the question doesn't understand. And it was really fun to try and create a really wide network of people who are sharing information effectively with the public, with policymakers and so on, at a time when it really mattered. So there's lots more to do in COP. So COP27 is around the corner. All of you in Egypt have this great opportunity now. I hope that you see the importance of this issue really grow and be present in the media and so on in Egypt, like we did in the UK. Here are some of the issues, and they all, as well as these technical issues needing to be addressed in the COP27 agenda. We all need to work hard to make sure that we're delivering action, as well as just high-level strategic agreement at these international negotiations. And universities have a great role to play. I just wanted to share this with you because we did quite a lot of creative things as well. My institute ran an art prize in the run-up to COP. And this is a picture of one of the murals that was painted under some railway arches in Glasgow. And we put together this art competition, and we were delighted when this mural that we had painted ended up appearing in quite a bit of media coverage, which wasn't really our main purpose of doing it. But it just goes to show that engaging scientists and artists together to get some impact can also be kind of powerful when all of the eyes of the world are watching your country. So let's collaborate together. I'll stop there. And thank you so much for taking the time to listen.
Thank you very much, Elisa. This is a really wonderful presentation, and it gives really a wonderful overview about the activities that you did, how you established such a network, which goal and which vision. That's very clear to me now, at least, and I'm sure to the audience was also very interesting. Also, your description of what were the steps to reach from starting very small and getting such a big network of 80 universities, but also having a core of a small team somehow centralized. That was really a key issue, and thank you for informing us about this. I like also the actions you implemented throughout the process, also the activities, starting website, media related activities, also research and engagement. Really a great thing to hear 12 briefing papers were produced out of the network in such a very short time, and also the engagement, the international activities, the net zero programs, really a lot of activities were implemented. And also the structure, I think also very, very important that we saw how the structure of such a network look like, and the core of having a steering group that's really with too many such disciplines that enriches, of course, such a network, and the lessons learned. That's also very important, but more important, the next steps, as you mentioned at the end, that you already have 4 clear aspects that you are going to follow up. I like also the dimension of capacity building, because that would be very helpful for us. I think we have enough time for Q&A and also for direct discussion. You have a golden opportunity today to discuss directly with Elisa. If you want, you can definitely take the microphone first for raise your hand or write your question on the text. And I think you have a very interesting possibility to have also a very nice discussion based on this, because I'm sure we should go in the direction of establishing a network, and this is an AUC internal discussion that we need to bring it further and also make use of such a session of gaining experience. Maybe till the people warm up, there is one thing that was not really very clear to me. I missed it somehow. Maybe you mentioned, but I didn't catch it up. You mentioned people come to the network. One of the benefits that they use the network is to get updated about how the negotiation is going on and get kind of information. Now, my question to you, what I missed is the relation between the network and the government. What is the interface? I mean, how can you communicate? What was the source of information? With whom you communicated? How did you communicate? Did you communicate with key people or different organizations? What is the structure and the mechanism of communication?
Yeah, okay, so that's a great and very important question. So when we first began, I think, as I said, our objective was to make sure that we were the single point of contact for government. But it was actually quite funny because it turned out that there was no single point of contact in the government for us. So we had been very careful, acknowledging that it would be quite difficult for them to speak to every possible, university and stakeholder. But actually at that point, the COP presidency team had not got their act together yet. So it wasn't really obvious who we should be speaking to. But having said that, there were a few emerging people who were clearly going to be important, particularly I'm talking about the civil service rather than the politicians. So, well, actually, it was a bit messy at the beginning, basically. There were a few civil servants who were clearly going to be quite important, who were already people who worked on this issue that we knew. And so we reached out to them, and they had also reached out to us because they reached out to the wider community of people working on climate. So a few of us knew those people who were starting to think about what hosting COP would look like. So at the very early days, we spoke to quite a few different people, and they were also really actively engaging with universities while they were trying to get their priorities right. So we had a few people asking us questions. But then what happened was once the COP presidency team was set up, they actually had a named person who was responsible for academic connections. And they also had someone who was responsible for science, what they called the science priorities for COP. So those are kind of different in the UK presidency, at least. They were different just than the negotiation focuses, which were on things like climate finance. And in the case of the UK presidency, they had things like nature-based solutions as a priority. But they also had some focus on science. And the UK presidency really wanted there to be some science outcomes of hosting COP, particularly promoting the importance of evidence use. And so they were really interested in making sure that they had contact with the academic community on this point. That meant that we actually had a named contact point in the COP presidency team. And so then from that point onwards, which was probably from about January 2020, we had one person and we spoke to them about every month. We had a regular meeting and they would share with us progress and we would share that with them our thoughts on what should be happening. They were our main point of contact. But then we also then endeavored to have a few other contacts. So for example, another part of the presidency, the shape of the presidency, is what's called the high-level champions, and they focus on connections with the private sector. And so we also made sure that we had spoken to the high-level champion team to understand what they were doing with the private sector and to connect the academic sector to the private sector networks. So some kind of connections we were given, and some of them we looked for deliberately, and then we just made sure we were in regular communication with them.
Thank you very much. That's very clear answer. So we go to the Q&A. I see now 3 people I take them as I can see them on the monitor. Bennett Sharma. So you can take the microphone and directly talk to Elisa.
Yeah, it was a wonderful talk, Alicia. So my basic question was regarding this. I mean, you did a wonderful job by, as a convener, by bringing in these, stakeholders, for example, academicians, or for that matter, scholars, etc. And those people who are basically, make this, COP20, who made this COP26 really successful. But my basic question is regarding this, how can we bring the actual practitioners, for example, the industry people, the main, policymakers of the government, who can basically really bring with them, who basically are the one who are basically doing all the groundwork. For example, industry people, executives from the building industry, executives from the transport sector, executives from the agriculture sector, because they are the one who are basically going to who are going to make this as a success, as far as these carbon decarbonization is concerned. So because that is where the actual this thing is actually lacking, and because there's a lot of difference as far as in the actual delivery, and as far as the actual
the question,
actual delivery and the actual as far as the perception is concerned. So how do you intend to bring can we have some kind of a regular as far as the COP27 is concerned, or the future events, because you can have actual lot of engagement on regular basis with these industry people, who can basically, as far as because the event as such is very short, it's a 1 week or 10-day event, but once you have a regular
thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you make an interesting point, and that's a perfectly, that's a really powerful way for universities to get involved. Of course, as you correctly say, the delivery of action on climate, a lot of that comes down to maybe some very big, influential private sector companies need to be doing more, and so on. So I think what I tried to illustrate is that by working together and collaborating, networks of universities can achieve quite a lot. Now, we put quite a lot of focus into the policy side, but equally, you could imagine a subgroup that was focused on private sector engagement, maybe along a thematic, that could actually achieve quite a lot because of the industrial relationships that many universities have. We just didn't do that. So, in a way, that's one of the kind of the weakness of the approach we took, where you had to have all of these voluntary groups working, is that you went in the direction of where your strengths were and people were willing to put in the time, right? So, there's, it could be very powerful for universities to convene around a set of industrial partners at this time and try and do something really timely around that topic. We did think about a couple of things. For example, the innovation subgroup did think about maybe working with some private sector companies to do something around innovation in advance of COP, but that just didn't come together. So definitely potential. What I'm kind of showing here is this is a kind of model. You can choose any focus area. The one thing I would say is it does help to focus, because there are so many different ways universities can have impact. You have to be really focused on where you can do the most, using this as a catalyst and an opportunity, which it definitely is.
Yeah, especially that we are running out of time, not in decision, but also in getting closer to the COP. So I hand over to the next. I think here is Professor Ali Aouni. He is the next speaker, next one to ask.
Thank you, Alicia. I have a comment and a question. My first comment is that it's very interesting when you form a platform which basically enables people, individuals, to sort of act. It's a amazing outcome that comes out of it. But this is conditional on building in some flexibility to allow for this. Don't plan it to the nth degree. Just leave a little bit of a space for people to innovate. This is the comment. Now, the other thing about COP27, this is the second COP that is held in Africa. The first one was the Marrakesh. What is an African agenda? What can a network of universities promote in terms of an African agenda, which is by necessity is very different than a UK or European agenda? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and that's why it's really exciting. Also, that it's in Egypt. It's really important. I think a lot of people are expecting the Egyptian COP to be focused more on the adaptation side, so impacts and adaptation, focusing quite a bit on the need for climate finance and emphasizing that. I think when we spoke before, or I spoke to one of your colleagues in Egypt only last week, someone said to me that actually, there's a lot of research that's happened in Egypt already on things like the Sustainable Development Goals. That's something that maybe is more prominent in terms of research than perhaps climate change as a topic. And I think that really struck me because I realized that the context in which climate change occurs and in which you're tackling climate change in Africa is different than the way in which it's being tackled and conceptualized in other parts of the world. And I think you need to bring that into the debate and the discussion. So the agenda at COP itself should be a little bit different. And in a way, that's something, again, this opportunity of universities to come together and share evidence and thoughts. The Egyptian network of COP universities, you should be writing a 4-page document explaining to all of us why it's different. What does an African-led COP and climate change action look like? That would be great. Great thing to add.
Perfect. So the next is Professor Mohammed Yassin. He is, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Hani, and thanks, Alyssa, for this very enriching and insightful. In fact, my colleagues and attendees have asked very good questions that I had in mind, but I'm going to ask you a question. What would you do something different if you had a chance to do, if you wanted to do something that you didn't do, or you had the chance to go back and do something that you, as an afterthought, you thought it's very important? Thanks.
Oh my gosh, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, honestly, it was so much more successful than we ever thought it would be. It was so much more successful than we ever thought it would be that I can't think I would do anything differently because I was just so positively surprised. And I think it's really because I was so surprised by the amount of interest. And I think Professor Ali kind of said that you make a platform and then people come and they participate, and it's brilliant. It's amazing. I guess I really underestimated the amount of support and time that it would take, like in a central secretariat resourcing role, to keep it going and keep it moving. And I think it would have been nicer if I had been able to identify some actual jobs and roles at the beginning and give it to those people. So some of the people working in my team, like, they were just picking up things left and right and center, So I think maybe a little bit more planning and structure a little bit earlier on, and especially in terms of support, would have been better. And there were a few aspects of the program, as I said before, when you're very dependent on people doing voluntary activities, it's a problem. It's quite difficult to manage if they don't deliver what you'd hoped they would deliver, because no one's promised anything. So one of my colleagues, now, we were talking about just very simple terms of reference. So that if somebody says, oh, I'm going to be on the steering group, you just have a little list of, if you're going to be on the steering group, here's what you're committing to, even if it's voluntary. So a little bit more accountability would have been helpful, because then it would have also just been helpful to politely say to someone, I don't think it's working. You don't have enough time. And they would have just said, you're right, I don't have enough time. But there wasn't a kind of a reference point. So simple kind of terms of reference without making it too weighty could have, I think, helped us keep everyone engaged and then look for new people if we had gaps in what we're trying to deliver.
Thank you very much. I think we take the last question. I know it's a very interesting discussion. We take Hani, maybe the last question, and then yeah.
Thank you. I'll make this quick. Thank you, Alyssa. Very, very nice overview. The question I had is, sort of the communication part. You mentioned, part of this was about educating the public. Part of that education, for instance, is, there's this expectation sometimes that green jobs will be created by governments, whereas, a lot of that is actually created by, the private sector. And so the role of public-private partnerships, was that also in your communication? Did that play a central part in your communications? That was really my question.
So not really. I think we mostly focused on engaging with the public. There was a group, as I said, there was this subgroup that was working on education and skills particularly, and you spoke about green jobs. And that subgroup, which then we ended up stimulating the formation of a government group, which included some government civil servants from different departments, but also we started to bring in some private sector actors there, because that was extremely relevant. So there was kind of a partnership created there, but we didn't do anything particular on public-private partnerships. In terms of communications, what we did do was we tried to make sure that we came up with some central communications messages that everyone in the network agreed with. That's quite a complex process, right? With hundreds of people, you can't get everybody to sign off some communications messages. But by writing the briefing papers, we could then distill what we thought were some core messages and use them as the centerpiece of our communications. And I can't remember then if we had anything specific there about public-private partnerships. But I think, considering your question and the question of one of your colleagues earlier, there's for sure more that we could have done in terms of working with the private sector. But as I just said, at some point, there's just a limit to the scope of what you can do. And that's an area where I'm sure there's lots more potential in the future.
Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Alisa, for the very interesting presentation, also for the audience, and the Q&A was also enriching further the discussion. Maybe one more or two sentences from you, Alisa. What is your advice for starting such a network in Egypt in last sentence?
I think, yeah, to make the most of this opportunity, it is a great, I mean, I've worked on this kind of topic for 20 years, and I really, really underestimated how exciting it can be to be in the country that hosts this kind of event, because it is an opportunity for you to connect, whether it's with the public or the private sector. People will be asking questions about this topic, and it's your chance to get your voice heard and make sure that people understand accurately some of the solutions to the challenges. So reach out to all of the people. A good starting point is all of the people you collaborate with now across your sector. So many people that you probably work with already. And even if they're usually your competitors, this is the moment to collaborate.
Thank you very much, Elisa Gilbert, for this very interesting, great presentation and also information you delivered today. And thanks for Gerhard Center for organizing this. Thanks for my colleagues who also contributed into the organization. And thanks to the American University in Cairo. And thanks to all the people who are with us today. And I'm sorry for anyone who was going to ask or wanted to ask, and the time is not allowing, I have to finish on time. But the last announcement, please follow the webinars organized by Gerhard Center. Next one will be, the speaker will be Thomas Halaf, the Associate Professor of Global Public Policy and the Director for China Engagement from the University of Oxford, another very interesting speaker. And the title will be How to Make COP27 a Success. So another speaker who is going to help us to understand more about the opportunities we have and how we are going to make COP27 success. Please follow also the Facebook of Gerhard Center. You will always receive update information and invitations for the next webinar. Thank you very much, and happy Valentine's Day. And I'm sure you have something else more interesting tonight to do after this presentation. Thank you very much.